Hello, and welcome to Just Stories. I'm your narrator and author, Montgomery Sterling McGale. But because we're friends, you can call me Monty. Let's dive right into Chapter 2 in Tuppy Diggers, entitled Wonderland. Pinky was with me in the cardboard box under an industrial work table. Grabbed Pinky by the nose and gave it a few cranks with my 4-year-old fingers. Music flowed from his head. Round wooden ball nose on a brightly colored plastic face made Pinky unusual in the world of dolls. Red Nose stood out like a sore thumb, linked to a music box within. His face, with exaggerated features and garish colors, attracted you at first glance. Pillows and blankets made a nest in the confines of the cardboard enclosure, and we laid in its soft comfort amidst the chaos and confusion of the laundry and dry cleaning machinery. Tucked away from the glare of lights underneath the table, I listened to the melodic plinking of music coming from Pinky, his head resting against mine. Sleep came easy. Subterranean world of McGale's laundry and dry cleaning was a magic place, a never-ending domain of discovery, a child's Shangri-La, adventure around every corner. Main Street, Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, typical Canadian prairie town, usual emporiums of ma and pa businesses. In a few blocks, you had a bakery, hardware store, pharmacy, Chinese restaurant, ladies' clothier, optometrist, hairdresser, barber, banks, farmers' co-op, and anchoring all was the post office on the most prominent corner. Steady stream of people always seemed to be filing in and out, taking care of life's details. In the very heart of Lloydminster, on Main Street, was a sign on a glass door shared by a drugstore, indicating that if you wish to avail yourself of the services of a dry cleaner, you must descend a flight of stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, an open glass door, no self-serve bell announced the arrival of a patron like most shops. Instead, there was a modern beam of light at shin level that made a buzzer sound when something broke its path. State of the art in the early 1960s. Children, read younger brother Trevor and I, that were fascinated by such things, on more than one occasion were encouraged to play elsewhere, as the buzzer's note was a call to arms. Bugger off was a familiar fatherly phrase. uh, Inside the customer entrance sat the cash register and a white laminate countertop where soiled clothes could be placed or bundles of clean picked up. On the counter, a sturdy stainless steel tube stood straight up about 4 feet. Its top, bent into a hook, served to hold customers' dry cleaning on hangers. Above this tube was a substantial roll of thin plastic film. Unrolling this and taking pains to open the clear plastic, one slipped a protective coating over the clean clothing. Plastic film was the thinnest and lightest of polymers. Emblazoned on every perforated section were the critical advertising details of McGale's Laundry and Dry Cleaning, featuring telephone number and address. Information was available in English only, as bilingual business laws didn't exist in the early 1960s. All dry cleaning left the place appended from hangers and wrapped in thin plastic that held no warnings that if it were wrapped tightly about your face and head, could prevent air from entering your lungs, potentially cutting off the vital supply of oxygenated blood to your organs, thus terminating your life. Such labels and warnings were a rare thing in the mid-20th century, as there were still areas of human interaction that used common sense as a guide. Men grabbed their dry cleaning by the hook of the hanger, This was then slung over the shoulder and carried like a sack of potatoes. Women folded garments over a free arm and let the clean goods drape from their limb. Not that women lacked the strength to adopt or emulate a man's technique. No, this was an era that enjoyed and celebrated the divergent natures of the sexes. Jane Mansfield and Marilyn Monroe were the bombshells that exploded in box offices throughout the land. Their lift and separate pointy bras were the norm amongst most women, and it wouldn't be right for a lady to sling her cleaning over a shoulder and draw even more attention to a protruding potential frontal impact zone. Women draped and men caped. Extending into the customer zone was a wondrous carousel of clothing, operating one of two buttons, forward and reverse. A grand ski lift styled apparatus with letters of the alphabet appended brought clean, hangered clothes swishing through the waiting room as the operator sought to find the customer's goods. Clients were shown the cleaned and pressed, fresh smelling garb, usually while suspended from the countertop hook. Occasionally, a persnickety person would want a closer look to see if that stain of red wine had been fully purged from her silk blouse, as hand-talking and theatrics from Saturday's soirée had left their mark. Clean again, she draped and departed, another contented client. Carousel, with its hanging inventory of attire, was a constant source of fascination, as every manner of body cover that needed the delicate yet powerful cleansing ability of the dry variety was represented and swung by our marveled eyes, better than television and in full color. Within the greeting area was the big red machine. Customers could view it in all its glory. Standing almost as high as the ceiling and twice as wide was a Ferrari red metal wall of colored lights, buttons, dials, and switches. Proudly made in Italy, this was the cleaner that didn't use water. Open the big round glass door and throw in a load of fine raiment that cringed at the sight of water, and you're on your way to a better life through the might and controlled workings of chemicals. Majority of stains were dealt a lethal blow with a cancer-causing, now banned, chemical, carbon tetrachloride. Carbon tet, as it was more commonly called, was all the rage in the 1960s. Stains didn't stand a chance. They were eaten in the process, reduced to mere molecules that melted from fibers that once held them captive. Subdued stains fell through a large stainless steel perforated drum that could easily accommodate 3 or 4 kids. Not that any of us were silly enough to crawl into the big red one, at least not during business hours.
You're crazy.
Yeah. Fascinating as the facade of the machine was, the back was where all the action took place. Elements of the process were metered via many pumps and piping that required mechanical controls via belts, pulleys, levers, and gears. Bursts of heating, cooling, and gyrations were thrown into the mix, all to banish the impurities from the tumbling clothes behind the sealed glass door. Action of whirling and movement danced in darkened corners where no customer was allowed to venture. Yet, a 4-year-old could lean in and watch the cacophony till his heart was content. Blasts of chemicals infused the air, and heat burst at your face with smells of an industrial nature that made you want to rush out and share this enchanted world with all your friends. Instead, you greedily kept it to yourself. Next to the customer counter, by the corner of the big red one, stood Dad's workstation. Part of his equipment consisted of a large foot-operated press, Asbestos-wrapped steel tubes brought steam to the apparatus, insulating them from excess loss of heat. Steam fed into the clamshell halves of the cloth-covered press. Foot pedal was used to bring the top down onto clothing, sandwiched and steamed, freeing it of wrinkles. Puff of vapor emanated from the perimeter of the press as another foot pedal was activated. Opening the press revealed a new-looking pair of pants with creases crisp enough to slice bread. Detail work of lapels on jackets was touched up with an industrial iron that tapped into an overhead steam pipe via a reinforced, flexible pressure line. Stubborn stains were given a shot of pure carbon tetrachloride from a high-pressure nozzle that connected to another overhead pipe which transported the wonderful smelling chemical. Standing at my dad's leg, I'd insist a mist of carbon tet rained down on my uplifted face as I enjoyed breathing the heady aroma of clean.
Oh my God. I'm amazed you're not dead.
Maybe I am. If you have ever had the pleasure of smelling old school leaded gasoline, you'll know the joyous aroma of which I speak. Lead in gasoline was carbon tetrachloride. Both have been banned from kids breathing them directly into formative tissue. Damn. Clothes that required laundering with water were weighed and priced by the pound. A wire cage on wheels with a large weigh scale built in was used for this purpose. Cage was usually in the customer zone awaiting service. When not, it was being gleefully guided about the premises with me or younger brother Trevor in it, and the other pushing it in a mad dash about the maze of clothing, equipment, and employees. Dad would run up behind, smack you on the head, grab you by the upper arm, heave you bodily from your race car, and throw you on the nearest mountain of clothing. That was half the fun.
Oh, that is
fun. Customers came down the flight of stairs with the street's natural light trailing behind them into a world of overhead pipes, strange emanations of vapor, smells of an unholy alliance of refined petroleum and artificial light, plunked down their few dollars and were back into the light of day with chemically enhanced, crisply pressed articles of vestment in their possession. They saw a fraction of the bewitching world that lay beyond, a world that held the attention and intrigue of my younger brother Trevor and myself. No windows offered light or air into the cavernous space beyond the first entrance. Back entrance stairs were a dark set of wooden steps that led to the back alley and the rear door of the drugstore overhead. Under the stairway were mops, brooms, buckets, pails, and many other implements of maintenance, a hiding place tailor-made for small bodies to crawl into and disappear. Peter, Dad, bounded up the stairs two at a time, his unmistakable signature cadence, with or without the weight of many sacks of industrial laundry that were destined for businesses in and out of town. Laundered goods were hauled in an underpowered Volkswagen delivery van, its lively livery of Disney's Pluto and vivid hand-painted motif advertised the cleaner and its location. Dad delivered large white canvas bags of sheets and linens to hotels, motels, and the mental institution located a safe distance from town. On rare occasions, I accompanied him. Somewhere north of town was the loony bin. That's what most people called it before the age of so-called politically correct enlightenment. Hidden in the woods, perhaps to muffle the sounds of patients that had the privilege to wander its grounds, stood a creaky old edifice that smelled of linoleum, stale people juices, and a mixture of melancholy. A visit to the loony bin was a necessary step in the coming of age of a 4-year-old. Men and women of indeterminate age were clad in identical white gowns tied in the back with flimsy straps of the same cotton. Varying degrees of modesty were offered, yet no one seemed to mind. Most inmates ambled about at a tranquilized pace and usually sported hair that matched their faces, disheveled. Clung to my father's leg, offered him another burden as he conveyed big bags of laundry to the linen room. Looking up at vacant people, some slobbering and others mumbling, didn't fill a kid with the usual joie de vivre. I was too young to imagine what trauma, either chemical, emotional, or innate, had caused this group of people to lose their grip on reality and take a trip on the crazy train. All I saw was the end result. Not pleasant. At the shop, we were back on familiar subterranean ground, our lair of chaos. Bags of insanes, people, laundry piled on the floor awaited their turn for a cleansing. Time to cut loose with Trevor and try to unsee what had been seen. In an attempt to keep the mountains of clothes separated, in a back corner were two loops of strong chain bolted to the fairly low ceiling. Hung between these chains sat a large plank of wood, 5 feet off the ground, and always draped with pants or suits or skirts or shirts was the swing. With each other's help, Trevor and I could climb and kick our way onto the long swing. Straddling heaps of clothes, we managed to start the board moving by kicking and swaying. Like sitting on a surfboard, we swung our clothes board back and forth. Regular objective of Trevor and I was to swing the board till it started to hit the back wall, our battering ram. That was our signal to fire retro rockets and bring re-entry to Earth's orbit. Battering ram surfboard swing was always available and overlooked the sorting table where pockets were checked and cleared of objects that shouldn't go through the wash. Lighters, jackknives, nail clippers, rings, and all manner of things with no value. Elastic bands, ticket stubs, washers, and matches, some of the items that didn't return to the rightful owners. Another source of fun, digging through jars to see what you could discover. Forbidden from taking anything,
Oh, sure.
lest the owner show up and describe his loss. This didn't stop us from playing with anything we found or putting it in our pocket for an hour or two, or a day, or three. Lunch. Often I accompanied Mum, Olga, on errands. Help held by Mum's hand, I ran and half stumbled in an attempt to keep up with her always brisk pace. Drop a few invoices in the slot at the post office in hope recipients would do the right thing and forward payment for services ASAP. Pay a few bills in hopes that services would continue to keep us in heat and light. Then we'd fly across the street and obtain lunch for the crew. Bakery, right across the street. Buns and bologna on a mediocre day. Ham, buns, and sugar-coated donuts for dessert if Mum were somehow a smidgen happier with her lot in life. Crew of regular workers included Grandma, Dad's mother, married as a young girl, 18, to a much older man. Grandpa was 48 when he took Bessie as a wife. I imagine the differences in their outlooks on life must have been quite divergent. Based on the age discrepancy alone, couple that with John Joseph McGale being an Irishman from Omagh, County Tyrone, and his young wife hailed from northern Britain. How they hooked up, I'll never know. They went on to have 9 children. John Joseph expired of throat cancer at the age of 77. 29 years of marriage, most of it spent in Lloydminster, Saskatchewan. By the time my brothers and I had come along, Bessie, Grandma McGale, had been a widower for many years. She was not large of stature, nor was she frail. Wiry and quiet were two words that summed her up. Not one to be boisterous or emit a hearty laugh, she was a product of her era. Influenced by crown and country, it wouldn't be proper to show base emotions as those of Latin countries. No, Bessie came from Victorian sensibilities where class and decorum, befitting a nation of imperialists and responsible managers of colonials, must lead by example and from a loftier perch. Holding on to some of the British mannerisms connected to her world she had left many years before, tea, and using the word ta instead of thank you, no doubt made her feel part of a bigger realm, instead of a purloined youngster that produced a Paddy's progeny of 9 children. We lived under the same roof with Grandma for a couple of years, as she quietly put up with us rowdy boys at her little house on 47th Street, Lloydminster, 5118 to be exact. In that time, she may have said a paragraph's worth of sentences to me. I'm sure she was quite conversant. It just wasn't with her grandsons. Her Christmas gift or birthday gift to us home invaders was always the same. We knew we could count on her to be consistent and timely. A crisp Canadian $1 bill in a Christmas or birthday card was always par for the course. We all liked her from a certain distance. At the laundry, Grandma McGale operated a steam press and other steam formers. A headless torso accepted suit jackets and dresses that were blasted with hot vapor via a foot control, while a handheld steam iron might be plied over a lapel or crease to give that snappy look of success. Grandma went about her tasks in the noisy jumble of activity with a neutral countenance. You had no idea of her state of mind. Could have been quite content with her life or quietly plotting the machinations and consequences of an arsenic induced mass murder Sunday dinner. Rehearsing her speech for authorities as to why she was the only survivor. By accident or design, Grandma occasionally had her hands wrapped in gauze, result of pressing the foot pedal that brought down the top half of the steam press onto her hands. Word spread that Grandma was to take a few days downtime. Back from convalescing, in recovery mode, gauzed hands worked the machine on more than one occasion as Grandma stoically pressed on. Part of the pack was Mrs. King. She had a wide, bright face with a ready smile and a contagious laugh. Everyone liked this affable lady in her 40s, who presented you with her rather tall and thin features. Keeping her slim was an ever present cigarette. In an era when smoking was the norm, she held her own and could be counted on to blow smoke and bark a healthy laugh, all while feeding sheets through a pair of ironing drums. Her short, wavy brown hair and large spectacles were part of a pleasant persona. Always happy, she was a kind and open lady, both at work and at home. Mrs. King lived north of town on a farm where a massive garden was kept. When the time was right, our entire family gathered at her farm. We plucked raspberries from canes, corn from stalks, spuds from dirt, and peas from vines, all manner of farm fare. Mrs. King's horn of plenty. Rumor had it one of her sons was killed in a motorcycle accident. I don't recall any other children. Perhaps they were older and on their own. Either way, Mrs. King was stalwart and a good worker. That was the bulk of the work staff, 4 people: parents, Grandma, and Mrs. King. Occasionally, you'd see a part time man drive the delivery van. Our bakery lunch was always a great feed. Shortly after, nature took its course, and growing boys needed a restorative mid afternoon nappy poo. Climb into my cardboard box. Pinky by my side, quickly to sleep despite the almost deafening noise that filled the place. Nap time never lasted long enough for Mum's satisfaction. Trevor and I would be up and full of enough chemicals to make us invincible. Extraction motors that resembled big vacuums pulled air from the ceiling and pumped it outside with a huge boiler, while a huge boiler kept steam and hot water available for all the needs of many stainless steel washing drums. Our basement den was a producer of heat that made winter weather a welcome break. Back corner of the parking lot behind the shop sat an old cast iron boiler, modified for another purpose, as it had lost the ability to be certified as a pressure vessel. Hundreds of hammered rivets held its many quarter-inch thick iron panels together. Its size and look reminded you of a steam locomotive standing on end. 3 feet up its sides, someone had used a torch and cut a door the size of a sofa's cushion, crudely hinged and creaked open to reveal ashes. Boiler was now a burning barrel, a big one, 6 feet wide, 9 feet tall, a solid vessel. Crude chimney was fashioned onto the slightly domed roof, topped with a metal rain cap to prevent ashes from turning to mud and making the next fire hard to start. Anything that could burn was thrown in, and a great many objects that were never meant to were also flung into the mouth of hell. 8-foot fluorescent bulbs could be tossed with a bit of gusto through the open door. If properly aimed, the tube smashed against the inside wall with a satisfactory explosion, which left the flinger and his audience in an elated state. If you were a little off and not quite bold enough with your technique, you ran the risk of a crooked entry. Fluorescent tube might catch an edge of the opening, blowing shards of glass and powder back at you. This too was not altogether unpleasant. Nobody ever lost an eye. Defunct incandescent light bulbs were pitched like you were big leaguers, showing the miners how it was done. Further back you stood from the strike zone, the more satisfying your ball would be when it struck the cast iron of the boiler's interior. Explosions were always gratifying. Spent aerosol cans offered a substantial pop after a few minutes of basking in the intense heat of a garbage fire. Flashlight batteries were always welcome. Young hands smashed every dead battery they could lay hands on. Flattened cylinders spewed droplets of mercury onto the concrete floor. Gather droplets with fingers till a drop is made. Play with those in your bare hands before throwing debris into the all-consuming conflagration. Sealed jars and cans offered a good snap or sound of bursting glass if they had a fighting chance of blowing before a lid melted. We were much happier if something popped rather than fizzled. Garbage fire offered hours of entertainment as the cast iron radiated with heat that warmed us to the core. Winter, summer, or fall, garbage burned, and we were there to see it disappear up the chimney and float into the ozone. In the back entrance of the laundry, you had a choice: go down the flight of stairs or proceed straight across ahead through the back door of the drugstore. Pharmacist was a friendly older man of slow, measured movement, as though he were a frequent sampler of the pills he dispensed. Never cross or showing displeasure, he was a welcoming beacon even to us urchins from below. He doled prescriptions from his elevated counter. The lofty perch had us looking up at his abundant bush of nose hair. Once Once you had his attention, he'd lower his smiling face and say, "What'll it be, boys?" When all the stars were in alignment, Trevor and I received a quarter or 50 cents to blow on whatever our imaginations could ponder. Often, our choice of plunder was from the drugstore. There existed a showcase of goods like no other in town. Next to the pharmacist's counter sat a glass case of warm nuts. A beautiful glass box with sloping front that featured a triple-tiered, circular, rotating set of trays loaded with hot nuts. Cashews, pistachios, filberts, and Brazils all danced around red heat lamps. Heaven. Most of the nuts had never been on our tongues, out of our price range. Names and prices per pound were listed. They made your head spin. How could nuts cost that much? Trevor and I were bottom feeders. Base of the enclosure was reserved for the lowly goober, not even a real nut, with brown films of skin partially clinging to the little salted beans sat a mound of Spanish peanuts. Parked next to the Spaniards and slightly higher priced were their naked siblings, regular salted peanuts. Hot snacks that reflected prices in a comfort zone for Trevor and I. Their value kept us coming back for a salty paper snack of warm nuts time after time. Can I have 25 cents worth of Spanish peanuts, please? Same for me. Orders drifted upwards towards Nosebush. Genial old man grabbed a couple of the small white paper bags and gave each a flick with his wrist. Open satchel then sat on his scale while he thrust a metal scoop into the thick layer of warm nuts, metered peanuts, and returned scoop to its position inches from our hungry eyes. Here you go, boys. We ran off to find a hiding place to eat our nuts. Under the stairs was good. Behind the big red one was also fine. On our plank swing was excellent. Sitting on a pile of RCMP buffalo hide coats was just Jake. Standing at the open door of the giant fire barrel and basking in its warmth was most entertaining. Underground workplace of steam and flashing lights, of chemical smells and blasts of steamy air, of people hustling and stopping to chew the fat, of bologna buns and sugared donuts, of warm nuts and hiding places, of smiling smokers and stoic grannies, of many adventures and endless laughs. The Cleaners was a grand place to grow and eat nuts.